All right, guys. Well, we've crossed the 100 attendee mark and it's still kicking up, but let's kick off. Excited to have you all with us today. My name is Porter Leslie. I'm the CEO of Amitros, and I'm moderating this panel of some distinguished speakers and good friends, and really excited to share this time with you all. And bit of background: this is in association with the Transitions Movement, which is something that launched late last year, and we've done a series of webinars on everything from communication, mentorship, and really, I think this one's going to be a central one. It's about leadership. It's about management style. And we've got some really diverse and I think unique perspectives on with us today from within the claims industry and from outside too. So excited to put this one on, and I'm going to pass along to each of the speakers so they can introduce themselves. And Doug, you are biggest on my screen, so I'm going to go to you first.
Perfect, appreciate it. Thanks, Porter. Good to be here with you all. I'm an executive coach, founder of Lion Point Coaching. Work with early stage, essentially seed through pre-IPO executives. I've had the opportunity to work closely with Marcus and Porter over the years. I've been in prior to executive coaching, which I've been in for about 5 years. I've been in a variety of operational management roles spanning a number of different industries. Initially launched my career as an officer and pilot in the Army, spent some time overseas. I'm just really happy to be here with you, learning from this panel and just offering my perspectives.
Thanks, Doug. And Sue, I'll kick it to you.
Thanks, Porter. My name's Sue Melody. I'm with Liberty Mutual. I've been with Liberty for well over 3 decades. I am in the workers' comp arena. I manage a team of roughly 200 to 250 people that really specialize in certain aspects of the WC claims environment, Medicare compliance, large losses, catastrophic losses. I'm excited to be here. I'm also going to give a shameless plug that I'm part of the Kids Chance of Massachusetts, part of the board and the chairman of the scholarship committee. And it connects really closely to what we do in the workers' comp environment and injured worker advocacy. So I think that has a lot to do with what leadership looks like in workers' comp today.
Awesome, thanks, Sue. And Barry, you want to hop next?
Sure, thanks. Good afternoon. I'm Barry Dillard. I'm Vice President of Risk Management for Walt Disney World Resort and for Disney Cruise Line. I've been in the industry for about 31 years now. Most of that time as a liability claims person. Started with Aetna and then moved on to Travelers once Travelers bought Aetna's property casualty. And so been with Disney for the last 23 years. I lead teams that handle workers' compensation and general liability claims, as well as a lot of other things, but we'll focus on claims today. And happy to be here with you.
Thanks, Barry. And last but not least, Marcus.
Hey, everyone. Marcus Torbert here. I am the co-founder and a partner at Fifth Century Partners, which is a private equity firm based out of Chicago that focuses on investing in sort of companies in the lower middle market by using a diversity and sort of purpose-driven lens to make investments in different companies. And I think what you guys know too, or some of you, is that prior to that, I had the good pleasure of working with Porter in terms of running Amitros. And I'll also put this plug out here that anything I say is not that great. You all heard that Doug is my coach. So he'll take full credit for any of the bad stuff. I mean, the good stuff, those are all my nuggets that I taught him.
Thanks, Marcus. Expect a few good jabs to be landed throughout this. So you kicked us off well. Well, thanks, guys. I think part of today we've had some lead-up conversations about management and the claims atmosphere, and I guess Sue and Barry both managing claims teams today. Maybe we'll start with you, Sue, on with so many changes over the last year or two, and folks changing in the space and the space developing. What challenges do you see when it comes to managing claims teams and making sure that they've got good leadership?
Great question. And as I said, 30 years or more with Liberty Mutual, I've seen a transformation in management and leadership through that time. And I would say, you know, what we experienced in the past was very directive management, the you know, big insurance company, I know the best way to do things, so do it as I say to do it, and that kind of management style, directive leadership. Whereas now we've transformed into that form where we lead people and manage processes, and that's a really big difference. Just as an example, this morning, I was watching the Today Show and saw Roz Brewer, who was recently named as the CEO of Walgreens, and said, I want happy people working for me. Happy people are productive people. I don't think 30 years ago I ever would have heard that phrase voiced by a leader. But today, that connects with me because our styles of servant leadership have evolved. Even as a leader today, I find myself asking, how can I help? What can I do to solve problems, solve for the process improvements that we need into the future? And it is about engaging our workforce in identifying and solving those problems, reinforcing the best practices, and reimagining and leading teams that can solve the problems of the future.
Yeah, it's a neat perspective, Sue, and it reminds me, I know, Barry, you love the Patriots, so no. But there's that notion of do your job, and you know, kind of that versus maybe love your job, right? Or bring your passion. So curious if what some of Sue said resonates with you, Barry. I know you're a Steelers fan, but
Yeah, it does. And like Sue, I've been around in the industry for a while and seen things change in terms of leadership. I think leaders were expected to be kind of one-dimensional in the past, right? Just, you know, kind of command and control, and, you know, don't be transparent, and that's changed over the years. And so we expect a lot more out of leaders, as we should. It's, you know, one of the most important jobs that you can do. And so it is more about communication, better communication, understanding your team, and making sure they understand you, inspiring people and challenging people, and sometimes disciplining people when they need that, right? It's also understanding that we're managing in a multi-generational workplace now, right? And so one size fits all will not work, right? We're going to have to treat people as individuals, and you know, that comes from communication, and, you know, you have to be genuine. People can see when you're really concerned about them, and when you're just doing it because you feel like, you know, that's what you read in the book somewhere. And so it is really, really challenging for leaders to be their full selves and bring their full selves to work. There's a joke I always remember about this leader kept looking at his employee in the parking lot as they came into work in the morning. The guy would leave a little bit of space, you know, not roll his windows all the way up. And he says, "Why do you do that? It's not that hot." He's like, "I have to leave a little space so air can get in for the piece of me I leave in the car every day." And so we can't have that, right? We need people to come bring their full selves into work.
gotcha. And Marcus, I guess in your investment world now, how do you view leaders that you may invest in, and does some of that resonate with how you look at companies?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I think, you know, we all, you know, be kidding ourselves if we didn't say that, you know, the way in which we need to lead others is quite honestly is changing. There's more stakeholders involved in how we make decisions. It used to be just about, you know, how much revenue do we generate? Are we operating as efficiently as possible? And those are the things that people prioritize when they're making investments. And now that's just not the case, right? It's more akin to what's the human capital behind these engines. And while human capital and people have always been quite important, it's becoming even more and more important today. So, you know, we look at it and say, at the end of the day, great leaders attract, you know, great people. So are people changing their styles to attract great people? Great people create great businesses. And then what you'll see is that in many instances, capital follows accordingly to go to those businesses that are being created. So, you know, at this point in time, when I think about just like new talent and how folks are thinking about it, I come back to a story where I had a business school professor who leadership class was very flowery around, everything you should be thinking about, right? There's this perfect picture of these, overlapping Venn diagram circles of, what are you good at? What will people pay you for? And what are you passionate about? Can you find that little shade of overlapping? Then you sort of found your sweet spot. And I think what we're seeing now with like what new talent is thinking about is it's not just all those things, but it's also, what are my values? And so it's becoming more and more difficult to align, for leaders to align with all these things, but the really good ones get it right. And the ones who get it right, they get the best talent, and those companies thrive, which end up getting the capital. So we're definitely seeing it take hold from an investment perspective, and expect for that trend to continue.
I think it's a good segue over to you, Doug, which you obviously have done some work with Marcus and me in the claims space, but deal with CEOs and leaders in all sorts of industries. And how do you see those trends that Marcus mentioned play out in other industries, and what parallels do you see kind of matching across the spectrum?
Yeah, I think broadly there's a generational shift that's happening, and that generational shift that's happening is this idea that work is the place by which that people can go and pursue their potential and push towards aspirations. I think it's always been the case to a degree, of course, but I think increasingly so. And I think it's required that industries and companies really keep up with that and recognize that in this next generation, so that they can retain, develop, and ultimately transition the leadership to this next generation. I think there's an expectation from this generation that's coming up. Barry, Susan, you hit on some great points. The words that I heard literally said were command and control. This shift from this command and control, more micro-oriented environment to one that's focused on clarity, to one that's focused on how can you help people gain clarity into purpose, into vision, into design, into culture, so that people can ultimately align with that organization. It's much more focused on what we'd call the military commander's intent, and then people's ability to go operate against that with autonomy, that it is saying, here are exactly the steps that need to follow. And I think you see a trend with this next generation of people pushing towards earlier stage companies, or companies that really embrace that. And the last piece that I'll throw out too, just at a headline level, maybe discuss it more, is this next generation really looking for managers who aren't just managers, but managers as coaches, and people who are really going to invest in their development, help to understand them.
That's a cool idea. Maybe I'll kick over to you, Sue. Your work at Liberty Mutual, how do you enter that coach position and inspire your team? Any ideas or examples there?
Sure. And building on what everyone said so far, like the employees that, we're looking at today and we're bringing into the organization, they want to find meaning and purpose and a sense of accomplishment in their work. And it's up to us as leaders to create that opportunity. I think in workers' compensation, we have this very unique position, and it's inherently built in injured worker advocacy to connect the dots to the work that someone's doing every day to meaning and purpose. Showing and coaching our employees through that every touch point matters, that we have an incredible opportunity to link the work that they are doing every day to the mission of our customers, and that capital that Marcus was talking about, the employees being the capital that businesses rely on to get things done and to create success. We can link what someone does in the workers' comp arena every customers and for the company overall. And to the point of coaching, there's moments in time as we're standing up new hires, as people are becoming more expert in their field and opening the doors to what the potential is to other areas of the insurance industry, be it in another line of business like liability or underwriting. There are these moments that I think in the past were missed, and today and into the future, we're being very deliberate about creating environments on a regular basis where we can talk to our people about their development, and we can talk to, you know, what they're doing well, and how do we develop them perhaps in skill sets that they need to lean into and develop further.
Makes sense. And maybe I'll kick it over to Barry. Barry, you worked at the happiest place on earth. And how do you, I know Disney has a unique culture. How do you kind of drive that through as a leader in the organization?
Yeah, you know, it's very happy place, but I always tell people it's not my job to make people happy, right? It's my job to create an environment where they can be happy and where they feel like they belong. And so it's removing the barriers to them being successful. I know leaders in the past may have felt like they had career conversations about, you know, with their folks, it may be like they were trying to guarantee them a promotion or some things like that. But no, people want to talk about their career path and how you can help them. And so it's really that. It's just, again, most of these things come down to having very transparent conversations, you know, telling people the truth about how you see them and where they need to develop, being empathetic and embracing some of the discomfort. I think over the past year, we've seen leaders really need to be able to have uncomfortable conversations with people and not shy away from that, and sometimes initiate them. And so it's a little bit of all of those things. But I think we're responsible for creating the environment.
Yeah, I would also, I know Porter, you didn't call on me, but I just wanted to follow up to Barry's. to Barry's question, where I used to think about this a lot, because Barry, you said something that really hit on, which, like, how do you create that environment? How do you think about that? And that, you know, you guys have all probably heard the phrase where people say, like, the airplane rule, right? You think about someone like, hey, could you spend whatever, a 2-hour flight next to someone? And something I used to think about was I call, like, the dinner rule when I think about folks. And the way I got to it is, like, you know, my wife and most people's spouses or families, when you sit down at dinner, someone's been working all day, and then they come to dinner and they literally just continue to vomit all the bad stuff at work, right? They tell you about how they hate their boss, how they hate their job, how their company didn't do this. And so I quickly started to realize that, like, you know, what's my dinner rule? Like, if any of my employees left, would they go to dinner with their significant other, with their family, and talk about their experience with me as a leader, a manager at our company, in a way that would be productive and positive, and not in a way in probably which most of us spend time talking about the places we work, you know, with our significant others or families or spouses. And so it was a simple way for me just to put it in context and just say, like, what's my, you know, similar to the airplane, what's my dinner rule? Would this person leave? Or for different leaders in the organization, like, do you think those people following that person went home and had a great dinner with their significant others, talking about their day at work? So I think it's right. Like, it's up to us to create that environment and make sure people have the right, you know, environment, coaching, leadership to really excel.
Hey, Doug, you must have seen leaders stumble or come to you for advice over the years. Are there any pitfalls or common traps that you think are out there?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think one, Barry's hitting on an important point, which is, like, the job isn't to make people happy, right? Happiness is kind of a byproduct of a certain style of leadership and management. And I think what I've consistently seen is that the thing to really focus, like, people are unhappy when they don't trust the intent more so than when they don't like the decision. Now, don't get me wrong, if they don't like the decision, that can certainly impact people in different ways. But more normal, usually it comes back to intent. And the thing about intent, I think, is the leader can control that via the transparency they give, right? And just in talking about what's the reasoning behind it, how does it connect to a vision? How does it connect to a particular goal? What's the why behind it? I think at times people can make decisions in an effort to just be overconfident. Are they making the decision are they talking about the degree of confidence that they have and what they're going to learn along the way to continue to gauge that decision that's being made? And I also think, too, there's another factor to this happiness piece as well, which comes back to, are you also attracting and hiring the right people? One person's job, there's a job for one person they may not be happy in, but to another person they are happy there. And it's not even a product of interpersonal always, but do you find meaning and purpose in that? Do the values of the organization match yours? Do the communication styles, do the mental models of the people around you make sense? But again, it's very much the job of the leader, I think, to really harness that, provide transparency into it in a way that Porter, Marcus, you've heard me say this, where they could play that role of chief clarity officer, constantly delivering clarity, constantly looking to achieve shared awareness, shared understanding, shared alignment.
Makes sense. Sue, I saw you nodding. I don't know if you want to get in.
No, that really resonated with me because, you know, the clarity of the mission, like all of our businesses, no matter what you're in, what area you're in, there has to be clarity around the mission, your goals, and that just fosters success because it allows people to understand how they fit into what that mission is, and the values that a company has really foster that job fit and that happiness, so to speak.
I think
Yeah.
one thing too, Doug, that I know we've chatted about some is getting the right people or different people into the organization. I know one thing we talked about is how organizations can focus on diversity and equity inclusion. And I know, Sue, you've been active at Liberty Mutual on that front, and Barry as well. Maybe you guys can share some of the things that are working or that you're implementing at your companies.
You want to go first, Sue?
Sure, happy to. So you're right. Most people may know Liberty Mutual just recently went through an early retirement option, and it meant that a lot of our great leaders, deep expertise were leaving the company through retirement. And, you know, we needed to backfill that. We needed to find and replace key positions and key roles, and diversity, equity, and inclusion was top of mind for me as I started to interview people and started to search for the right fit. And one of the things that, to some of the earlier comments, one of the things that was really helpful for me was being able to share Liberty Mutual's culture and the environment that we have, being able to talk about how we foster an inclusive and innovative culture, how we believe that individuals thrive and feel valued when they're in an environment where they can bring their full self to work. So it was wonderful to be able to refer back to all the work that we've done over the past maybe 5 to 10 years, developing employee resource groups, talking about allyship, and how important that is for us as we start to bring new employees on board, new leaders into new roles. That's what is going to foster greater success for us into the future. And I would also add the humble leadership. Like, I learned so much through this journey, through the ERGs, and I am learning every day from the new generation that's bringing in different cultural perspectives and different ideas. And it's incumbent upon us to be open to that, to say that, yeah, I've been around for 30 years, but I still have a lot to learn, and being available to that.
Yeah, just to tag on to that, I think, you know, at Disney, I feel like we've always been kind of on the forefront of diversity and inclusion and equity. And so it's no surprise to me of the things that we're doing now to move that ball forward. And so it is things like the biggest thing I think is we are now, you'll see us more vocal about things that are happening. So, you know, with the George Floyd verdict that was recently out, we actually made a statement about that. Whereas years ago, we never would have thought to do that as an organization. And so it is really, I think, the biggest change. And, you know, we have programs and different things. We have employee resource groups, but it is encouraging leaders at all levels to have conversations with people about things they never would have in the past. And so I think that's, you know, the cast members who work for us see that change, and they appreciate it.
Maybe I'll pass the mic to you, Marcus. I mean, I know it's a lens on how you look at at different companies as well, and what you see inside a company in terms of that, does it influence how you're thinking about the investment?
Yeah, I mean, look, it you know, taken strictly to like sort of a business perspective as well, it says a lot about the company and what they're investing in, right? I think if you were just a betting person and you were looking just at an industry and you took DE&I as an industry, you'd look at a world, especially in the US, where the minority populations are becoming the majority in 5 years, right? You look at a world where Doug spoke about the generational shifts that I'm sure we can all see are more vocal, very vocal about these things, right? And those are going to be the leaders in 10 or 15 years who are calling the shots at some of these places and are making decisions. You see a world where social media is allowing for, you know, things that may have not been aware to all of us to become more aware. So I say that to take a step back and say that from us, from a business perspective, we just think it's good business too, right? You should just be, I mean, this is just, if you were saying healthcare trends or workers' comp trends are going this way, this is something that you would just say, if you aren't thinking about this, if you aren't taking it seriously and being proactive about it, you're just making bad business decisions. And we wouldn't want to invest in companies and leaders that were just making bad business decisions. The second point I guess I would make here is that we also look at it as a strength for businesses, right? We look at, and I know it's sort of cliche because people say it a lot, but like a diversity of the leadership team really does add a deeper bench, adds a more thoughtful bench. And it doesn't always have to be, you know, racial or gender, right? There's socioeconomic, there's other perspectives that come to bear that are really impactful that we've seen firsthand at companies that we've invested in when they've had more diverse teams. So we take it seriously from a business perspective. We think it's great business, and we also think obviously it's the right thing to do. We've also seen situations where I'm sure many of you have, that recruiting talent, it's been some find great talent that has sometimes been overlooked. So a lot of this comes into that. The one thing I will say is overall, I do just high level on all the conversations is, you know, how do we take more action, right? So I think to Barry's point, we're seeing folks being more vocal, saying things that probably 2 years ago wouldn't have said, and now how do we, you know, put you know, all of us collectively like put that into action and make DE&I a primary initiative like you would treat to the CEO of an organization landing a new client, rolling out a new product, right? It should have that much attention and that much structure around it.
Yeah, Marcus, you know how you do that is you tie it to executive compensation, right?
Gets people to make different decisions.
Yeah.
And I think what's changing too is data. Like what helps us make decision is data, and the more data we are interested in and looking at, whether it's the data around our new hires and what colleges are they coming from, and data around our employees being comfortable enough to share with us what their perspective is. Do they want to tell us what their race is, what their religion is, what their you know, orientation is? That helps us understand if we are really making progress in the DE&I, because I think historically we've had some, from a data perspective, a blind eye in that.
I guess one topic I wanted to toss over to you, Doug, is, you know, part of the transitions movement is about people moving on from their career. There's this graying tsunami of folks retiring out of the insurance space. And how do you transfer all that knowledge? You know, Sue mentioned Liberty Mutual's had a lot of retirements. And I feel like it's the perfect question for you, because how do you align knowledge and clarity and that understanding through people and through organizations as a leader? How should people conceptualize that?
I think whether it's knowledge transfer or anything for that matter, I think it starts with leaders having a really clear vision for what the future state looks like, which isn't always easy to do. You know, the responsibility of the leader oftentimes say, here's the vision, here's a picture of the future, because you have to have that vision to know what the goals are. Goals just simply bring a vision to life. These are the things you want to accomplish, the benchmarks, the milestones to bring a vision to life. They're the brushstrokes. Once you have goals, then you're going to put a design in place, which is a product of who are the right people, who are the people to take over this leadership, to design this, whatever it may be. And then you have people simply operating and running that design to say, is it working, is it not? It never works the first time, and therefore, what do we need to learn? How do we need to improve and iterate? And so I think to tie it to knowledge transfer, the question that I would offer to the audience to consider is just how much do leaders specifically or just across the industry have a really clear picture or vision for what that is? Because I think it really starts there. And I think a lot of these themes or ideas that we're talking about very much tie into it, but having that clear picture for what it should look like. I think, of course, knowledge transfer is also serving the goal of simply enabling the future leaders. You're passing on this wealth of information that leaders have. And so it's also taking a step back or maybe a step up. It's thinking about what does the leadership transfer look like, and how can we ensure that this one aspect, which is knowledge transfer, can also go well over the course of what doesn't happen over the course of a few weeks, is going to happen over the course of years and roles, and just be a longer term transition to pay attention to.
I had one question on that, Porter. I guess more for Sue on the Liberty side would be interesting, because you talked about the early retirement and where people are. Were there like any, I don't know, like working groups or specific things that were set up to make sure? Because I mean, there were a lot of people that I think that took the package and stuff. So were there specific steps you guys took there?
Yes, absolutely. I think early on, we recognized that we had to embrace a change management mindset. Like, how were we going to work through this logistically, tactically, but also with the people in mind. So for example, we wanted to make sure we were honoring the retirees that had dedicated, again, decades of their lives to the company. So that was one aspect of the change management. How do we make sure that we send them off in a positive manner, while at the same time managing the processes that may be locked in their proverbial vault of information? Like how could we go through a process where we asked everyone to think about those things that they do that maybe nobody else knew about? We all have guidelines, best practices for managing workers' comp, but there are always idiosyncrasies. Like, there is one person that knows how to do a specific thing. How do we commemorate that? So we had to devise vehicles to facilitate that knowledge transfer. And then the last component was thinking about the people that were impacted by this, right? So I talked about the retirees and honoring them. We also had to think about the people who worked with those retirees and how they were feeling and what impact this was going to have on their job. We have a substantial amount of people that moved into new roles. So how do we incorporate that knowledge into those new individuals working in a different role? And then we also, from, again, a leadership perspective, we needed to make sure our stakeholders and partners, called the customers, our brokers, underwriting partners internally and externally, were kept apprised of what was happening so that there were no surprises. So to answer your question, Marcus, yes, we looked at this as being something big that we needed to make sure we were disciplined about and thoughtful around the change management curve that this situation presented to us.
It's such a, if I could just jump in, Porter, for a second, it's such a great example, because as I'm hearing you talk, Susan, there's vision, there's goals, there's design, there's humility to say, here's what we don't know and where we have to go to different groups to find these answers and begin to experiment. So as I talk about those different dimensions, no one leader does all of those things well. And in fact, it plays to this shift from the command and control leader as hero to leader as servant leader, who can also just help bring people together, bring diverse views together to find these answers and create that vision, which is also, I think, an important shift that's happening. Getting to clarity across those dimensions isn't the job of one leader. It's the job of the leader to bring the people together and to build that clarity over time and get to more of those answers over time.
It's really neat to hear about it, especially you guys did it during the pandemic, which I'm sure added a whole nother element to it. Which I also wanted to kick over to you, Barry, because on the spectrum of companies that probably had to really adapt with the pandemic, I would think Disney had to be pretty nimble, and that was probably a test for leadership with you and across the organization. And how did you guys adapt there?
Yeah, it's you know, where to begin? So for starters, we, you know, our property closed for about 2 months, right? Walt Disney World's never been closed for more than a day ever. And so we closed for 2 months. We furloughed thousands of cast members for months. And so it took adjustments to be able to still do the things that we needed to do to operate on a skeleton crew, and to keep everything going, right? So, you know, just because our parks closed didn't mean that we still didn't have claims to manage and you know, people to take care of. And so it was really looking at the things that were most important and not doing the things that we could get away with not doing. It was taking care of and having empathy for both the people who are now working, but having to do a lot more, and then the people who are not working, who are, you know, sitting at home and waiting to get called back to work. And so fortunately, over the past few months, we've been able to get a lot of people back, but we still have a few people who are furloughed. And so it's managing both of those things, making those people still feel like they're part of the family, and then making sure that, you know, we don't burn out the people who are still working. And so it's been, and it also helps we saw a couple things that, like Sue was talking about, in terms of people, one person who knows how to do this one thing that nobody else knows how to do. And we really work hard to eliminate those single points of failure. But no matter how much you focus on it, you're going to have, you know, one person that can answer this particular question or knows where this particular resource is. And so it's overcoming those things as well.
Definitely neat to hear. I just got pinged. We got some questions in the chat. While I pull those up, this one's kind of a free-for-all for you guys. Obviously, the pandemic has changed the way you lead, right? A lot of us are remote all day. So whoever wants to jump in, I'm curious if there's any nuggets of wisdom or truth you found as a leader dealing with the pandemic.
I've got one that comes to mind real quickly, is that not every call needs to be a Zoom call, right? People get fatigued from Zoom. I get fatigued. So this is my home office. And whenever I get a phone call, instinctively, I get up and walk around my house while I'm talking, because you're tied to one place all day long. And so if it doesn't have to be a Zoom call, don't make it a Zoom call. But your team needs to see you too. And so you have to strike a balance between those things.
Yeah, I would say I forgot to have a couple of regular conference calls. Someone called me like a regular conference line. I forgot how to like get in there and just, you know, how do you share and communicate and take and like let someone else talk and like talking over each other. So that's a good point. I got to work on those skills when we get back to the real world. But I would say one thing I think is unique that happened through COVID, that it's going to be a testament to the leaders, is that, you know, everyone's talking about the generational shift, and there was already a blending of personal and professional worlds, right? That some of the older generations weren't used to, that now people are bringing their politics, their thoughts, their personal life to work, right? And that's a shift. And I feel that COVID accelerated that. Now you're in people's living rooms, literally. You're with their kids, you're with their families, you're seeing how they live at their home. And so you have this whole element that has typically made leaders very tepid of, like, how do I like deal with someone's person, right? The personal aspect of people. And that's only accelerated in my view now during COVID, because now you're talking about what you see in the background, what's going on. And so it's been a real testament for like leaders on how to navigate just the generational shifts, but also now the acceleration of into the personal that has happened. So I don't know if I have the answer, Porter. I'm just an observation.
Anybody else want to jump in?
I'll jump in. I think one of the challenges for me as a leader is I'm a people person. I like being in an office. I love stopping in the hallway and speaking with people, and just those really off the cuff moments. I miss that. So it's how we can use the tools that are available to us, whether it's Teams that you just IM somebody first thing in the morning, hey, how are you? How was your weekend? Or jumping on a video call. But I definitely think early on, there was a lot of effort to keep people connected with Zoom happy hours and like trying to make things fun. And I think rightly so, we've backed off a little bit on that because it just, sometimes it was getting stale and almost pushed. So I think we're falling into a pace or a better cadence of how to stay connected with our people and have those moments of just connection that happens naturally rather than being forced.
Yeah, I'm like you, Sue. I value so much just being able to walk through the office. Sometimes it's not, you're just saying hello to people, but you're making a quick connection, and it is harder to do virtually with the number of people that we have, right?
And Sue, I missed it, but we got a comment from one of the audience singing your praises, saying that you flew out to meet with their claims team. This is Felicia Ominta, said you came to see her team in San Diego, and it made a big difference. So yeah, those personal touch points can go a long way, internally and externally.
Hi, Felicia.
Another good question from the audience, which I'm curious, have you coined a phrase or named your leadership style? I don't know if there's a buzzword or a way you describe how you lead.
I can kick that off, Porter. I think I kind of came up or began my coaching career with an organization called Talentism. And they're focused on, you've heard me use the word clarity a bunch, and it's the model that I coach under as well and use over Lion Point. But it's this idea of clarity leadership. And again, clarity as defined by you achieving that shared awareness, shared understanding, shared alignment being actions. So without going into the model too much, like that's one. I think there's also in recent years, you've probably, even the term has come up in this call, this idea of servant leadership. There's a great book out there. I'm drawing a blank on the author right now that's written about it, but that's also had a significant influence on me. And so maybe it doesn't kind of play to like naming a style per se, but I think those are the first two that come to mind.
Yeah, I can jump in. This is something my revered executive coach taught me throughout my years. It's not as flashy or positive, but it came down to like basically like know your blind spots, right? So as a leader, you don't have to be great at everything, right? And you shouldn't think you are, but you should at least be very aware of where you have blind spots, and then how do you build a team around you to support it. So I would say that's when it's just being, I've become just much more transparent and honest with myself about like, you can't be perfect, right? Like, but at least you should know where you're imperfect at, and try to improve it. So yeah, sort of knowing the blind spots.
There's another.
Perfect. You nailed it. You nailed it.
There's another good question, which is if you could choose one resource, and this is kind of related, that really resonated with you in your development as a leader, what would you choose? I don't know if that's maybe a book or a person, but if any of you guys want to chime in on that.
I can.
You go. All right, I'll just say for me, it's people, right? It's different people that are either mentors or peers that I just learned so much from people that, books are great, but people's experiences have really helped me and shaped me as a leader, I would say. And that's both positively and negatively. I learned what not to do from a couple people too.
So I'll add is, and it somewhat connects to what Marcus had talked about, is I do a lot of reading. So I've read a lot of books about leadership, but I think the most impactful exercise was an event that Liberty sponsored called a leadership assessment, and it was, call it a 360-degree assessment, but it was this suite of tools that provided feedback on different leadership capabilities and where I had strengths and where I perhaps needed to develop skills. And all that was to also demonstrate that situationally, you need to be able to pull on various skills at various points in time, depending on the situation, depending on the audience, depending on, you know, what is happening. So to me, that was very helpful.
Doug, it looks like you had an idea forming there.
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, I want to echo Barry's point. I think the best thing you can do is also seek out mentorship and just learn from people. I always tell people that I can flash back to my plebe year at West Point when you're not going through that first year. They're not just trying to make the year tough just for the sake of making it tough. They want to teach you followership. They want to get you exposure to different styles of leadership. And I'd learned as much from the leaders that I responded well to as much as the ones that I just didn't. But so I think like seeking out that mentorship, the different styles, because I'm going to offer a couple books, but I don't think there's like one book that says, here are the answers. Leadership is about just being authentically you. And I think it's a matter of also lining up with the right context. And as a leader, creating that context through culture, purpose, meaning. I coached to this. So much of my identity from West Point in the military was tied up in leadership. And then I was in a couple roles post-business school where I struggled as a leader. I didn't fundamentally change. The context was different. How I was understanding that context, my own blind spots was different. And so I would also encourage that reflection on that self-awareness. Books that kind of help you see and understand blind spots and self-awareness, I think is really helpful for anyone who's developing as a leader, understand those strengths and weaknesses. The two books, actually three books that I'll call out quickly. One is an author, Dan Coyle, wrote a book called The Talent Code and also The Culture Code. Love the books, quick reads, great anecdotes. I think there's, no matter the leader that you are, there's just great nuggets in there. And then also the book Drive by Daniel Pink, which I know is a pretty common one that a ton of people have heard of. If you don't have time to read the 250-page book, there's an awesome 10-minute YouTube clip where they tell the whole story of the book in 10 minutes of whiteboard animations. But those are three books that have had a pretty strong impact on me.
Nice. We'll have to add those to the handout, which reminds me, there is a handout. I'm not sure exactly how you get to it, but how you're logged in, you should be able to find a handout that has also some takeaway bullet points from the speakers.
I thought Marcus was mailing it to everybody at the end of this.
I am. Expect it in your inboxes soon.
We got a question from John Kane, who I think that's John Kane at Liberty. Can you discuss how diversity, equity, inclusion increases productivity and fosters a positive working culture? We talked about it a little bit earlier, but curious if you guys have seen it in action or want to talk about its impact.
Yeah, I mean, I can chime in a little bit here, especially in the positive working culture. I mean, I think naturally some folks have, I've seen at least the experience that by, having folks in your peer group that are different to you, like it naturally just exposes people to different experiences, different life experiences of other people, different leadership styles that might be positive. So we talked about a lot, we've been going through like, how do you, it's talking to people, like you've heard Barry say, it's interacting with people, Doug, it's talking to people, seeing how people lead. Sue mentioned it. So a key fact here is like people, in my opinion too, are like what helps you shape some of your own authentic leadership styles. And I think the more diverse perspectives you have, quite honestly, the more you're able to understand from whether it's different cultures, different socioeconomic, how people were brought up and environments, they're going to have a different perspective that helps you shape your thoughts, become better and become more knowledgeable about just like a broader stakeholder group. So I think there's some natural ones there that just resonate with me and that I've personally experienced firsthand as well.
And I'll add to that. I think from a business perspective, the more diverse your employees are, the different perspectives they bring to the table, the more we will be mirroring the injured workers that we're serving and be empathetic to what it is that they're dealing with, as well as our customers. You know, that reflection of who are the leaders of our customers in the future, they want to look and see that we're mirroring their environment, as well as the injured workers, feeling like they have somebody that understands them as well, culturally, language-wise. There's just so many aspects that a greater degree of diversity, equity, and inclusion will foster better business results.
Yeah, and quite frankly, stakeholders and shareholders are demanding it, right? The public is demanding it. Our employees are demanding it, right? It's not just the right thing to do, and it doesn't just make good business sense. If your company's not doing it, it's going to create problems for you, right? And so, you know, in terms of the way I see it, it's kind of what you all have said. You know, greater perspectives brought towards solving problems. You know, diversity of thought. It's all those things, and also people want to see themselves represented in the companies that either they work for or that they do business with, and so that's just another reason to throw on that big pile of reasons.
As a first-hand example, just think about how much better off Barry is now that he knows a Cleveland Browns fan. Like that is, you know,
makes me feel better about myself. You're right.
Well, a couple other questions in there. Maybe we can round it out with anecdotes where you realized, you know, leadership really worked or really didn't work, or advice from those that those experiences that you would share with others. That's a free for all too. I don't know if you guys have any stories, times you were a great leader, or maybe not so great, but things you took away from it.
Yeah, I have one, and it's a little embarrassing, but so my first leadership role was in a liability claims team, and I had a team of 6 ladies on my team, and 5, 6, I can't remember now, but I quickly found out that I was not a good enough communicator very quickly, because I was going along thinking I was doing a great job, and people were like, "Why didn't you tell us about this?" What? So for me, like I have to lean into communicating more, because I operate on what I think I need to know, and as a leader, I was giving people what I thought they needed to know, but that wasn't enough, right? And so I used the phrase they sandpapered me down to make me smoother.
Okay.
That's pretty good. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'll jump in, Porter. I think I think that one of the primary differences I think between leadership and management is, like, when you're managing, you can, of course, like with authority, with role, you can get people to do the thing that you need them to do, right? But I think when there's, like, you bring and really weave leadership into it, and you talk about vision and meaning and connect with your people and serve as that manager and coach, you notice people going above and beyond and doing more than what you're asking of them, right? And the need to micromanage becomes less. So I think really looking for those signals from people. And I think it's like one anecdote I can point to is I'm going to flash back to my, military days, where a few people in my unit who would, like, instead of calling me lieutenant or whatever the protocol was, and actually at that time started to somewhat jokingly call me coach, right? And there was a little bit of a joke and a jab in it, but it was also because they felt like I was coaching them, right? And that there was a general approach that I was taking that was different from what may be the standard military approach, and put up air quotes for a reason. So I think really looking for those signals from people. How are they responding to you, and really what are you getting from them? And before you stop and ask, well, why isn't that person doing more? First stop and start with yourself and think about, where do you fall in that spectrum of management versus leadership?
Yeah, I'll hop in and say, probably early on in the Mutuos days, there was this concept of, like, I came from like this crazy financial services world, was working crazy hours, cranking, and really driven by how hard I was working. And I think sometimes the natural tendency of some leaders is to assume, like, that everyone is driven off of the same things. And so having that, I would say, misalignment early on, and being like, well, heck, why don't people just want to work and get paid, right? Like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing here? Realizing and taking a step back and realizing that, you know, to give people direction and to assume what they want to do and force what to do, to Doug's point, that's easy, right? But to customize your leadership style and to think selectively about the folks that you lead and that you work with and that you serve, like that's hard. Like it's really, really hard. And realizing that, no, that's not what drives everyone. Some people just want to make sure they could go home early to spend time with their kids. Some people were excited about the fact that they were acknowledged. Some people, and that's hard to do it. So I would say early on that was a mistake, is like assuming that there's some uniform, right, group of wants and needs, and that's not the case in those situations.
And I'll just jump in here in terms of like just being thoughtful about unintended consequences. So like a lot of these examples, I'll recall when I first took over managing the complex unit for Liberty Mutual for workers' compensation, it was a countrywide, it was my first time managing a countrywide presence. So yeah, I had some late nights. There were times where I was doing work on the weekends, and I started to recognize that there was some concern over that. And I asked my management team, like, what's going on? Why are there, why is there some friction here? And I never expected my people to have to do that. It was just my way of working. But the unintended consequence was that if they saw I was online, they felt they had to be online. And therefore, there was this work-life balance issue that was emerging before I think that was even a coined phrase. So just being able to take that feedback and to change the way I worked, I still did it on the weekends. I just turned myself off of green or as away, and didn't, believe it or not, I found the trick that I didn't have to send emails out over the weekend. I waited until Monday, and then emails went out on Monday. But it was a significant change for the people that were reporting to me, that they didn't feel obligated to stay late, to work weekends. And I never intended that, but you can see where just having lines of communication so people can provide you that feedback helps from a leadership standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess the final question for folks in the audience that are hoping to improve their leadership, what do you guys do to kind of take stock in how you're doing and improve yourself? I don't know, I write in a journal sometimes that helps me kind of understand what happened in the day and then formulate a plan. But I'm curious what you guys do to kind of unwind and maybe reflect and try to build on your experiences.
Yeah, I let Doug beat me in the head with the bat consistently on one-on-one calls occasionally, but no, in all seriousness, I use a lot of my, like, it sounds weird, but like it's like running. So like I actually use that time because it's a unique time where I'm not attached to my phone. I'm not thinking about work, and I use it to think about like actions, and to Doug's point, more like strategic thinking about like either myself or things in the future. So it has the double impact of trying to keep me in shape, and also focused on some broader initiatives. So that's a big one for me. Just enjoy.
I think we really have to turn to the people around us. We've talked about blind spots here. I mean, we're all humans and wired to tell ourselves narratives. There's only so much that we can see. We're all perceiving the world, in our own way. And I think the best thing that we can do, which is really hard to do, to spend the time to ask others, to get the feedback, to do that reflection, to understand like your own role as a leader and a manager. But I think even the best of us, whoever that is, you're gonna have blind spots and things you don't see and you can't understand. And so really carving out that time to talk and proactively seek that feedback and create a culture where it's comfortable to get those open thoughts early and often.
Yeah, I agree. Feedback is probably the way that I learn about it the most. And you have to have people that are comfortable in giving you that feedback, understanding that you're not going to fight their head off. Not as good a shape as Marcus, but I do try to work out a little bit too, and that gives you some clarity as well.
Yeah, I talked earlier about some of the major changes that are happening, specifically on my leadership team. So I'm being very thoughtful about my brand and how this new team that I'm standing up, these new leaders want to be managed. What do they need from me? And opening the door for them to give me that feedback. Meanwhile, as my other managers are moving on to either other opportunities or retirement, just having a conversation with them. Provide me the feedback. Now you're in a situation where it's a free for all. Go for it. Tell me. But it is an opportunity to get that kind of feedback.
Well, I want to thank you guys. This has been a lot of fun and some good insights. So appreciate you all taking the time to share your perspectives. And you know, I hope the audience enjoyed it as well. With the transitions movement, I'll mention as well. There's a mentorship program that you know, we're still getting close to finalizing, but I think if you want to get involved, that's another aspect I don't think we touched on as much today with some of this feedback. But the transitions movement has launched a mentorship, and you can offer to be a mentor or a mentee as well. So check that out on the LinkedIn page. I had to put that plug in for the transitions. But once again, I want to thank you guys. I really appreciate you all taking the time, and you know, look forward to being in touch.
Thanks so much, Porter.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Pleasure. Take care, everyone.